Does anybody grow more than just a few salad things for the kitchen? Cool. Does anyone save their own seeds? What do you save? What sort of stuff do you save? Whatever goes to seed?
Capsicums, herbs.
Cool. Have you got any dear old heirlooms from Grandma or Grandpa have been kept in the family? Yeah? Cool. Well, I guess we'll start with seed saving then. The first thing I think with the seed saving is that there's what we call selfers and outcrosses. So that means, like, if you're talking human terms, like, should I say this in Kalani, but humans shouldn't interbreed. Like, they got to outcross. So, sorry, mate. Sorry. That was just a joke. I don't mean that. But there's lines of plants that they don't need to outcross. They just self-pollinate, year after year, and it doesn't affect them. They don't get something that's called inbreeding depression. So some plants like corn, they probably suffer the worst from inbreeding depression, which is if you continually only have even a small number of plants, say even 10 or 15 corn plants, and you just keep saving that seed from those year after year, it'll continually degrade, lose vigor. So they need a certain amount of genetic diversity in there to keep it vigorous. Yeah. But stuff like, take lettuce, that's a pretty common one. It's a inbreeder, so you can just save from one plant, continually do that. But anyone that's saved lettuce seed knows that you get enough lettuce seed from one plant, it'll last the rest of your life, unless you're growing acres of lettuce. Yeah. Other things that are selfers are beans, like green beans, dry beans. They have no worries about just saving. It's always good to, save, a few more than just one. But if it's just for yourself in the garden, it doesn't really matter. Like, you want to keep it as simple. If it's just for yourself, you want to keep it as simple as you can, so you don't have any hard rules. But if you want to get into seed saving to, keep a variety going to sell, or just for, it's an heirloom from great uncle, what's the name, from wherever, that you want to keep going, it's probably, you want to keep a few more than just one or two every year, even if it is just a selfer. But
Don't plant them all, always keep a few for the next year, just in case you have a failed crop.
That's right. And another a thing to do is, if you save every year, is don't just discard the years from. I always sort of mix, so you keep about 3 years worth of lines in there. So you just always sort of, so you plant a little bit out from, the third year, second year, first year, because that third year might have been a really dry year, and a certain plant's done really well in that, but this year it's a really wet year, and that other one hasn't done well, but this one has. So, because whenever you save seed, you're like, whether you're conscious of it or not, you're selecting. You're a breeder, like you're selecting for traits. So the more you can be aware of selecting for those traits, the better, because you're doing it anyway. So if you say you've got 10 lettuce plants there, and you see one that's doing, it's just for some particular reason, it tastes good, it's big, it does well, and the rest are, mediocre, that's a good plant, so you'll save from that. But you probably don't want to save from the weak little one. For some reason, it may be just environmental, that there's something there that it's not doing well. But if you can see it's in amongst some really good ones and it's just not doing well, you probably don't want to save from something like that. So yeah, self is beans, tomatoes, another one. What do you got? Peas, or your garden peas. Most of you, for later on, we'll get into like growing, subsistence farming, like for your barleys and wheats and stuff. They're basically inbreeders too. Like they do out all these things that I say are self is they do outcross, but it's the percentage is a lot lower than like your obligatory outcrosses. So stuff like that, the outcrosses that need to be pollinated by something else, that would be stuff like corn. Corn's one. You've got your stuff like let's go back a bit. Outcrosses, they have both male and female plant flowers on the one plant. A lot of selfers, they have what's called a perfect flower. They have a flower that's got both the male and the female parts in the one flower, so it can pollinate itself. And a lot of things like beans, they'll actually pollinate themselves before the flower will even open up. So unless you get like a stray insect that goes in there from another one to pollinate it first, that's why it's depends on where you are with your insects, like your pollinators. It's a bit of a rarity to get a crossing of that. But stuff that outcrosses has male and female plant flowers on the plant, so they need to get the pollen from the male flower onto the female plant, and they can pollinate themselves. And some things it doesn't, like zucchinis and pumpkins and stuff like that. They can handle being pollinated by themselves over and over. They don't seem to suffer from the inbreeding depression. But stuff like your brassicas, like your broccoli, collies, kales, if you like that sort of stuff, they have a mechanism that they can't pollinate themselves. So they need, if you just save one broccoli plant and you haven't got another one, you won't get any seed, or you'll get very, very little, because you need another one to pollinate it. So you got to keep that in mind, because you got to know your families of plants too. Like brassicas is a good one for that. Is that you say you got broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, kale. There's 4, and you think, oh, they're all separate species. I can just say that they're all the same species. Kale will mate with broccoli and cabbage and collie. They're all promiscuous. They don't care. So you'll get this weird, unless you want to do some plant breeding, which is fun and cool, like to get some new weird varieties, then you got to keep those ones separate. Any questions?
I find with corn too, you know how a cob of corn's like say this long?
Yep.
Chop the 2 ends off, because if you plant all the corn, it'll come up like that. So if you want, just keep the middle bit of the corn, which are the better kernels, and then you'll get an even crop. You won't get the odd heights and everything.
Yeah, I've heard that from people, that they just take the middle, and yep. I've heard that the tip yep. will be earlier maturing and that will be later. I've never done that myself, so I can't give any evidence on that. But yep, corn, you need the lowest number of plants for long-term keeping of the seed is they work on about 50 plants. So, but you don't have to do that in the 1 year. Yeah, for pollination, because they're wind pollinated. So if you just plant a row of corn, the wind might be coming from side on, and all the pollen will be blown there, and you'll find you'll have all these empty, cobs. But if you plant that same row and you just do it in a tight block, the wind, you'll get a lot more pollination. So always, plant corn in blocks.
It always seems to be stunted on the edges anyway.
Yeah, well they're copping all the, I guess it's like a forest.
Yeah.
The trees on the outside cop all the wind, and
What about stone fruit?
Stone fruit.
That's fun stuff.
That's cross-pollination, a lot of it.
Yeah, they will self-pollinate. Stone fruit, like peaches, most of your varieties of fruit you'll get, they'll be like the F1, F2 hybrid. So with the breeders, they might cross they might be wanting a red plum that matures in October. So they'll cross a yellow plum that matures in October with a Santa Rosa or something that's a red plum, and they might plant out thousands and thousands of those until they get that one that meets their criteria, especially modern breeding. So then they'll find that one, and then it'll be all grafted on the rootstock. So you'll have orchards that are it's basically the one tree just cloned. Like if you've got a certain variety. So then if you take the seed from that and grow it out, it's probably going to segregate out, because that first generation, it's like when bringing it back to people is, you might say, oh, the grandkids look just like grandpa or whatever, because that first, when there's that wide cross to get that F1, which is the hybrid.
Experienced heritage fruit trees.
What's that, sorry?
Heritage fruit trees. Some of the fruit is hundreds of years old varieties, and the fruit's incredible, intense taste, stuff we can't imagine.
Yeah, modern breeding flavour is probably the last of their criteria. Is number one is shipping. It's got a hand. That's why you get cricket ball tomatoes now, and second is appearance, because you go in the shops and you look and you think, geez, that looks nice, it looks so nice, and you eat it and you're just so disappointed.
And you just go, why did I bother with that?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Better if I grew it myself.
Are the
Yeah,
heritage ones available though? Have you come across the...
yeah. I graft fruit trees myself.
Yeah.
There is like online
There is, I know there's
nurseries there's especially a lot in Victoria. They specialise in that. There's one called Heritage Fruit Trees. There's Yalka Fruit Trees. There's what's that one?
Dallies is a close one.
Dailies. Yeah, they do mostly like subtropical stuff, but for like your stone fruit, like your deciduous trees, yeah, they do some of it, but most of even that stuff that they do stock is low chill stuff, which can work if you're on a plateau here in Killarney and you get very small frost. You can be having, peaches in late, early October or whatever, something like that.
With your stone fruit, some of it's self-pollinating. You have a look at your particular tree itself. Some of them will self-pollinate.
Yep.
Some of them will need another variety.
Like an almond or something?
Yeah, almond will always need two.
Almonds always do, yeah.
There are some apricots and peaches and plums and that will self-pollinate, but not all, so you've got to keep an eye on which ones are. And then you've got what they call a hybrid, which if you've got a hybrid, don't bother keeping any seeds off, because a hybrid's a mongrel, it's like a mule. And if you've got a hybrid, you may do all right on seeds. So that's another thing that you've got to keep in mind as well.
Peaches,
And then you've got to hope they all flower at the right time when they need to.
there's only one variety of peach I know that isn't self-pollinating. It's called something $1 million peach, and it's the only peach I know of that needs a pollinator. Like you said, most apricots, most stone fruit, except cherries, a lot of them they've got a few varieties now which are selfing, but even stuff that's considered self-pollinating will always set a heavier crop if you've got a pollinator.
So the stone fruit, if you have them all together and eat in your nectarine, are you saying that they will pollinate and...
Almonds, nectarines, peaches are the exact same thing. They're just one's just hasn't got fur on. Almonds can pollinate peaches. I don't know if it's the other way around. Yeah, because an almond is just a peach that's been bred for the kernel inside, and you can get there is natural crosses of like your peach cots and stuff that. It does happen, but it's pretty rare, and you've got a lot of the time you've got to actually pollinate it yourself. It's lining the flowering time up because a lot of when you even if you got say you get 2 plum trees, they need a pollinator. You've got to make sure that flowers at the same time, because if you get one that's flowering a month after, it's no good because when you usually at the nurseries, it'll say pollinating partners.
Oh, yeah. They seem to pollinate themselves, but you said that cross-pollinate. Does that mean like plums, peaches, and apricots will all turn into the same fruit?
Not, they don't normally, but they can. That's how all the hybrids come about.
You can get some of the breeds will self-pollinate.
Yeah.
If you look at when you go to your nursery, if you're going to buy the tree, you find out whether it actually self-pollinates or whether you need a pollinator.
Okay.
Can we ever get into the nursery anymore?
And then you've got to teach them how to be flowering all at the same time, because it doesn't always work that way. So sometimes, like we've got one pear tree self-pollinates, and we've got another one that just missed out because it flowered early and nobody else was around. Had no friends.
Something I do is
bees.
because in the past a lot of this area there was lots of orchards around, so you'll see there's a lot of feral fruit trees around the place, or especially around here. Like there's peaches everywhere, there's apricots everywhere, there's apples everywhere. What else? You get the odd plum, but you can find really nice fruit on it. Big fruit, it's good taste, and some are small and crappy, but that's what I do when I'm driving along the road, and my wife gets a bit scared as I'm driving when I'm like this, looking at all the fruit trees, and because I'm checking out where the fruit trees are, and if I find there's a good one, I'll take a graft or I'll take some seeds, and a lot of my root stock for my grafting comes from just the wild peaches here, because I know it's adapted to here, super hardy, so why would I graft on top of something that's I don't know if it's super hardy for you.
I was going to say, outside of Westport, could you see any apples there at the moment?
Yeah, I got a lot from there actually. Yeah, there's some nice apples up there, and even just up a bit further near Fisher Park, there's a little cluster there. There's some beautiful big apples there. Nice taste. Oh, not multi, yeah, not yet. I actually have, but not by accident because one of the buds didn't take. You can, but you need to. Most of the time you'll get one that's a lot more vigorous than the other, so you've got to keep them pruned at the same, because if one gets away, like a peach is going to be a lot more vigorous than an apricot on the same thing, so you got to keep them about, keep that tree balanced. How'd we get into fruit trees? I love fruit trees.
How long will, like, let's say, a broccoli last before you have to pull it up? I mean, they get pretty heavy duty, but...
You mean what you eat, the broccoli part?
Like, can you just chop it low? Like, because every now and again I'll get, like, right now I'm having problems with the slugs.
Yeah.
And so I've been putting down some extra earth around when it's not raining, but they'll just completely devour one whole plant, but the other one will be raging. So but that plant is still green.
We've got an escapee.
So, will they last? How long will the broccoli plant
Oh,
last?
well, broccoli that I've kept for saving seeds from, I've had them go for like 2 years. Like they'll just keep, but you'll find they'll get crappier and like your little florets. Sprouting broccoli you'll have for a long time, but if it's a head broccoli, some of them don't have much sprout, but some will just keep going up. Yeah, but it all depends on the variety, like it does.
Okay. Because the same thing with the cabbage. I'll cut the top off, but they'll have a little ball underneath.
Yep, that's the little sprouts coming off. I would, for home gardeners, I wouldn't recommend, unless you really like them, growing the big head broccoli, because you chop it, unless it's one that gets lots of side shoots.
Yeah,
others.
mine gets lots.
Yeah, because you get one, like a lot of the modern varieties, they don't do that because when you grow in rows, you just want to chop it off and then it gets mulched in. But for home gardeners, you want to chop it off and it just keeps coming back, like you keep getting your baby broccoli. Yeah, and you can get months and months out of that.
Oh, okay.
Until the aphids or the plant says I've had enough. Yeah, depends on the season and what's around you. Yeah.
So like, so you're saying you keep cabbage away from kale and silver beet type thing, or do you separate them?
Silver beets, it's a different thing altogether, but only if you're saving seed from it. Yeah, if you're just growing it, that's fine. Yeah. Okay, well, I might talk a bit about the subsistence farming thing. I started I don't know, probably about 10 years ago, looking into growing my own food, but on I don't know, keeping that maybe an apocalyptic view that you can't just go to the shops and buy seed, you can't go to the shops and buy inputs and all this sort of thing. So I started looking and see, well, how did the cultures of old, how did they, because they've obviously thrived for a long time. And I sort of, after a lot of experimenting and stuff, I come to the one conclusion. They all had their staples. I'm not talking about like veggie garden, like salads and stuff. This is stuff to keep you sustained, like energy food. Like they all had a starch, and they all had a protein, which is they all had a grain and they all had a legume. Like so, the American Indians, they had their corn and their beans. Like Asian countries, they had their rice and their soybeans or azuki beans and stuff like that. European cultures, they had like wheats or barleys and field peas or broad beans and stuff like that. So after that I sort of set out to see what worked best for me, like in my, what I wanted to do. I keep it on a human scale. I didn't want to be having to have a combine going through half an acre of wheat so I can get my wheat or whatever. So I've grown plots of wheat and spelt and stuff, and harvested it by hand with a sickle, and then threshed it out, and made a loaf of bread out. There's so much work from growing it from scratch, harvesting it yourself, to de-hulling it, then milling it, and then making your sourdough and that. And I thought, man, this is hard work. There's got to be something easier. So I started looking into other cultures and how they done it. And for me, I found the best bang for your buck and for ease of harvest, the American Indian, their corn and their beans. Like the corn was so easy. Like you get, I'll show you some corn in a sec. You just get your ears. You can just walk on, pull off by hand, and you get, on a cob of corn. To harvest that much, wheat, there's a lot of work to go in that, and it's super easy. You can just, even if you don't have a machine, just peel it off. And you can, in a very small plot, like something like that size, you can grow a lot of human food that'll sustain you for a long time. And then so I looked into their systems of how they done it, and they, you know, they had their corn and their dry beans. So I searched and found all the Native American Indian corns I could find legally and illegally, and got a huge collection of dry beans. And so I've been just finding varieties that suit my area best and what I want to do with the food. So pass some of these around. These are Native American corns.
Wow.
So most people think of corn as just yellow or white maybe, but these are, well, you don't get anything prettier than that, I reckon.
I reckon you would do that in the garden just to have a look.
Yeah, well, a lot of, and you see in the heirloom seed catalogues, they've got ornamental Indian corns.
Oh wow! Yeah.
They're pretty much a mishmash of all the old corns to make them look all multicoloured, but the Indians never had corn like that. They kept in their separate colours because they've got, yeah, because they've got different uses. Like, because you can divide your corns into a flint corn, a flower corn, and a dent corn, which is right in the middle of the two. So a flower corn, which they are, is you can basically put it in your mouth, crunch it, and it'll break into powder. So it was easy to put in a mortar and pestle, however they ground it up, and you had flour. But your flint corn, which is the outer part of the corn, is that really hard. That's where the colour, like your maize that's growing around here, that orange, that's the flint. It's this really hard thing. You hit it with a hammer and it shatters. They're more for like polentas and stuff. Like the Italians done a lot of corn too, like with polentas. So they have different uses. So if you've got all that mixed up and you try and make a certain thing, it's
not always gonna work.
no. So I've set about finding different varieties that I grow flowers and flints just for different things, because your flower corns are for like tortillas. You make tortillas.
Yeah.
You can make anything out of flour. And when I say flour, corn flour, people think of the stuff you get in the shops to thicken your gravy. It's not like that. It's just like a wheat flour. It's a whole flour. You can make cakes, cookies, or biscuits if you're in Australia. All sorts of things like that. And
Just a little comment, not regarding what you're talking about, but when the British went to America,
yep.
95% of the people were employed growing food.
Yep.
And I was just trying to convey the concept that you were talking a little bit before about how hard it was to...
Well, that corn spread, that's when they went to America, the Indians showed them how to grow the corn.
After they said
Yeah, and then corn's spread around the world. Corn's got an evil name now because you get GMO corns, and corn's growing everywhere in these monocultures. But the way the Indians grew it and what that corn is, it's great. Like the yield per acre you get out of that corn for the amount of work you get in is unbelievable.
So where do you get this? Do you sell the seed, or like how?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I've collected a lot of seed now. Yeah. I had covert means of obtaining the seed, which I can't disclose. It's probably the only ones of those in Australia.
Just to clarify that, is that if people come up and see you afterwards, you can organise some seed?
Yeah. If someone's interested in growing something like this, come and see me. And if there's enough interest, I was saying to Russ, we can do a day on like getting in the nitty gritty of doing stuff like this, or whether it's seed saving or subsistence farming or whatever. Time's up.
Yeah. Sorry, mate. I gave you so. Can we have our hands together for Nick there? And as he was saying that we are looking forward to that, if there is interest from here on to every presenter that will present here. We've just touched on the very, very basic stuff, really just surface stuff, So hopefully if there is more interest in anything, we can organise other